Happy New Year, everyone. Tu Lei here, one half of the China EVs and More duo. Outside of hosting our weekly live Twitter Spaces room and China EVs and More podcast, Lei and I are always kicking around ideas for new ways to inform you, our audience, on all that's happening around the world in the EV, AV, and mobility sectors. When I approached Lei about launching this podcast almost 3 years ago, I had anticipated that what happens in China in these sectors would have huge implications globally. And that's precisely the case, especially in Europe and the United States, the two other largest auto markets. Despite all of the drama of 2022, China was still able to lead the world in NEV sales at around 6.7 million units, and it wasn't close. That's almost 100% year-over-year growth, by the way. What's more, of the 1.8 million EVs sold in Europe between Q1 and Q3 of 2022, 11% came from Chinese automakers, a significant increase from just 2% in 2020. And that number is only going to grow. That's why it's so important to learn and know more about these companies, executives, brands, products, features, and services that are already hitting your shores, whether you're a consumer, analyst, consultant, or banker, but especially if you're a legacy OEM or a Tier 1. I'm pretty confident that there isn't anyone else out there that can provide you the type of detailed, up-to-date, and accurate coverage, insights, and opinions that Lei and I do. Our audience has grown significantly as the podcasts have piled up, and with this drop, we'll have reached 100 episodes, and that wouldn't be possible without our loyal audience. So thank you for being curious and keeping us honest. I am very pleased to introduce our latest Max episode, where we bring you conversations we've had with special guests from the EV, AV, chip, battery, and mobility space. In this episode, Lei and I get a chance to sit down with Zack Anderson, founder and CTO of ClearMotion, an automotive tech growth company that's mission is to transform the quality of time we spend in motion by making transportation more productive, comfortable, fun, and safe. Zack's passion for the transportation space started at a young age and continued on during his days at MIT when he participated in the Darpa Grand challenge as an undergrad. Lei and I met Zack outside a cafe in Noe Valley in San Francisco, so we apologize for the recording quality. Zack, thank you for joining us. I don't know a ton about ClearMotion, and, Lei had kind of introduced the company to me, so can you please tell us about, first of all, your personal journey, your experience, and how you became a co-founder in ClearMotion, how long you've been around, what products and services you provide, and is it specifically to the automotive sector, what other industries you're looking at?
I guess tell us the inspiration behind this company.
Yes, and let me just start out with a little bit of sort of personal background. I've been pretty interested in the transportation mobility space since a really young age. So my first business I was building electric go-karts. That started out as a hobby in middle school, and I started driving around with these electric go-karts, and kids in the neighborhood saw them and basically started coming to me, hey, can I actually purchase one? So started a business doing that, and I started to actually add some sensors to those vehicles. It started just for fun. So at the time, this was like sonar sensors. I was driving down sort of the alleyways of Los Angeles, making these semi-autonomous. This was before even that word, really was a thing. And in 2004, the U.S. government put out this competition, the Darpa Grand challenge, to create a autonomous car that would drive.
I was just reading about that, but to continue.
So
I'm a Carnegie Mellon grad, but
oh, nice. Okay, so CMU was they were definitely the kings.
CMU plus GM.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I guess it was a Hummer, and then we had a Honda sponsored team that I co-founded. So basically, it was mostly universities. I was still in high school at the time, so I started the LA high schools.
wow,
that actually made it to the final race. So we were in the top 10, competed against Carnegie Mellon, And I think that was really interesting. This was in the early days of self-driving, but it really got me pretty interested in kind of where the industry was going in the future. And ended up going to MIT, studied computer science, electrical engineering at MIT. And I was always sort of thinking about, starting a company. Transportation space was something that was interesting to me. I met Shaq there, my co-founder, and we were thinking of ideas about how we could, make an impact. And we came up with an idea that initially was something slightly different than what we're doing today. But then, as we were looking at sort of the industry in 2012, we sort of had this realization. And the realization was that with some of the trends that were still very early at the time, driver assistance systems, ride sharing, Uber had just been sort of founded around that time. We saw this transition towards the passenger experience. And we had this realization that the future of automotive was going to be a lot more about kind of that passenger experience in the car than it was about horsepower and handling and all these things that sort of, driven differentiation the most. We saw that, the passenger experience. And we said, what needs to change? What technology needs to be developed to really allow that future of kind of this mobile office on wheels, this kind of living room on wheels, this environment in a car that's pleasing, comfortable, safe. And we looked at it and we said, basically motion control. So we need to control the motion to make for a stable ride where we get reduce motion sickness and actually enable a comfortable, safe ride.
So Uber was also in its early days, I believe, 2012.
That's right. Yeah.
So
we have it in New York City, one of the first cities that they deployed in, and we were trying it out, and we were in the back seat, and we were coming from a meeting, and I had my laptop, and we were like downtown going uptown. So I was trying to work on the laptop in the back seat, and this car was just winging all over the place from just the city roads. We look at each other and we're like, this is not the future. Cars, the whole point of driver assistance is to actually give people back time once you get to level 3. And cars today just don't enable that. So that was sort of the moment we're like, this technology, like we need to solve this problem.
So then the next question is, it's been 10 years. Why has it taken so long? Because I've known you guys for at least half of that time, right? What's the secret sauce behind the technology? What has changed? What's hard about it? Why it's been so long?
So we sort of launched into this. I think we initially didn't appreciate how hard of a technical challenge this is. And probably a good thing, but I didn't realize that.
I think most EV startups can say the same thing, Grant. And autonomous vehicle startups can say the exact same thing.
Because you could get something working in a limited environment pretty quickly.
Yep.
I mean, you look at like Cruise, Kyle Vogt got the first autonomous cars moving pretty fast, but then really developing out all the different use cases and meeting all the requirements, that ends up being really difficult.
Right.
And the industry has been trying to make active suspension what we're doing for about 35 years. So almost all the car companies and auto suppliers have tried to do this, and they haven't been able to make a mass market system that really is able to control the motion of the vehicle or cross the bandwidth of motion inputs that happen. And we came at it with a very simple hardware solution. So the secret sauce is basically using a motor attached to a pump, and it's in lockstep with a wheel. So really simple. Basically, we use hydraulics to create mechanical gain. So we create very high force levels with a small motor through leverage.
Right.
The challenge with that is you have this motor that's spinning bidirectionally up to thousands of RPM in milliseconds. And so to do that without causing noise issues, to do it without causing issues with fast and transient impulse, it's very difficult. We basically had to invent a bunch of technologies, mostly software controls.
Yeah. So let me interrupt you there, Zach, because there's a lot of companies doing suspensions, Delphi, so ZF, ZF, and they were just evolving, right?
That's right.
And moving the needle a little bit forward. So, talk to us about the software part, right? Where, because you took a leap and now it's a revolution, or you believe your product's a revolution, not an evolution.
Absolutely.
And so why is software such an important component that they missed out on, the legacy tier ones and tier twos?
I think it's just a very different way of sort of figuring out the world. How we thought about things is let's create a really low cost, simple hardware system and then a software to sort of plug those gaps. And then create a platform to enable software functionality to actually enhance functions even after the car is sold. And I'll give an example of that. Our system cancels motion, but it also can create motion. So what we're doing now is we're actually developing software to actually even enable our system to interact with the infotainment system in the player to create motion like movie experience.
Like Dolby Atmos type of stuff.
Exactly.
I've experienced that.
So, exactly.
Yeah, I know what he's talking about.
Yeah. And actually our first customer is pretty excited about this very sort of application, being able to actually integrate the infotainment of the vehicle. Eventually, I think you're going to start to see metaverse experiences in the car. It'll go pretty far. We're not there yet, but this is pure software. So once you have that platform,
Right.
you software control. And if you think about the evolution of chassis control within the auto industry, when I was working on the Darpa Grand challenge, we had to hook up a bunch of motors to the steering column to even like actually turn this car.
Right.
Today it's digitized.
Yeah.
It's electronic.
Yeah.
Electronic power steering is on every car. It was on snow cars 20 years ago. That hardware has now enabled all the software for lane assistance, driver assistance. So once you digitize motion in the car, in that case, the y-axis of steering, you could use software to create all those results. And it's a pretty interesting way of thinking about graphics. Creating a hardware platform to control motion and then having all these software features and functions actually increase value.
So is the hardware pretty standard off the shelf, or is it customized, or do you have a big mechanical engineering team and a software development team, or how does that work?
We do. So we're about 50-50. So about half the team is the software, about half the team is mechatronics, because electronics and hardware. It's a one-size-fits-all solution. So what we made was basically it's active all device that is the same on all vehicles, but it is a relatively customized component. We're using some off-the-shelf components, such as a brushless DC motor, but for the most part, it is a custom.
Okay, very cool. Now, you said it's a one-size-fits-all, so you can use it commercially as well as with passenger vehicles, or? So
our launch product is one-size-fits-all for basically passenger cars that range anywhere from sort of smaller pass cars through pickup trucks.
Okay, got it. And do you see this being one of those cutting-edge technologies that will start in luxury vehicles first and then trickle its way down into more mass market vehicles?
When you look at most technologies, typically they'll start at a slightly higher price point, premium segment, and then move down market. That's basically the trajectory we're on. What's exciting, I think, is right now we have concrete plans to achieve pretty meaningful volumes pretty quickly, which allows us to bring that cost down and start to sort of move into that mass market faster. But we're starting out more premium initially.
Tell us about the Neo Capital investment. How did that come about? And
so historically, we've brought in basically investment from mostly financial investors interested in the space. I mean, it's undeniable. Sort of auto tech is a massive sort of market opportunity. But what we were really looking for always was somebody in the boardroom as an investor that really deeply understands bringing automotive technologies to the market. And in addition to that, as we look at, especially the last 2 years, just the innovation that's happened in China within the auto industry is just, it's been massive.
So
it's unbelievable.
Let me be clear with this, Zach. Yeah. You just said innovation in China. Yeah. So you believe that the Chinese are innovating, because I think a large portion of Western audiences still don't believe that. And so I think that's why I wanted to stop you for a second and emphasize that, an MIT educated engineer is saying innovation's coming out of China. I think that's really important.
Absolutely. I think there's a huge amount of innovation across a number of industries in China, especially the EV space.
And it's because there's so much competition.
It's a ton of competition. Things move really fast. And there's a very large market. It's the world's largest automotive market. It's the world's largest EV market. It's growing faster than any other sort of market for EVs. So you're bound to have a lot of opportunities.
What is your positioning? are you a tier 2, tier 1? Are you competing with the suppliers that are investing in you, like Conti, ZF, all these players? What's the dynamic there?
So we have two models. Our launch, we actually are a tier 1. That's what the OEM is looking for. So we'll be the system integrator, but we are working with some of the traditional tier 1s to supply components such as the shock absorber.
So you're their frenemy.
I would say, no, I would say we have a pretty good relationship. I think it's pretty symbiotic.
Until it's not.
Wow.
For the companies we're working with, I'd say it's symbiotic. I think our partners understand that this is the next revolution in chassis and sort of vehicles, and that we've got leading technology. So it's symbiotic to partner together.
Sure.
It also have capabilities we don't have. So it's
Scale.
It's a partnership. They have scale and
Customers,
a lot of customers and a lot of know-how in how to manufacture high quality suspension.
I'm just giving you a hard time because having been in Detroit now for the last almost 3 months, catching up with some of my traditional automotive friends, I feel that they're starting to get it, and it's evidenced by these companies laying off a lot of traditional engineers and moving more towards this mechatronics and the software developers, right? And begrudgingly, they are moving to EVs, and we'll see that more and more in the next 4 or 5 years. But and I feel that there's huge opportunities for companies like yours to really make a difference here, because you're going to be the catalyst for these Contis to move faster, for these ZFs to move faster.
So the first applications of this, is it going to be on an EV or on an ICE?
I would say that almost all of the customers into now, they're not all pure play EV players.
Okay,
but they're all looking at EV launches first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's just because EV is more than an electric motor and batteries. It really is where most of the automakers are bringing out their latest technology. And it's appealing to a new type of consumer that's really looking at the car as more of a technology device like a smartphone.
That begs a good question. Is your technology more suited to software-driven vehicles like electric vehicles, or you're obviously platform agnostic, but is it easier to work on a NIO and a BYD or a Tesla versus a traditional Tahoe or a Mercedes?
Yeah, so the system works on ICE or an EV, but there are some cost advantages to directly integrating into an EV, given the power systems that are already on board. And also, I would say that a lot of EVs have pretty advanced infrastructure for all of their updates, and a lot of EVs coming out have pretty powerful GPUs, CPUs for processing, which allows us to do some of the more advanced functions that I'll talk about maybe a little bit later. So there are some advantages in EVs. Yeah.
Talk about this plant manufacturing in Shanghai where you're headed.
So I can't say exactly where the location is yet. We're actually still in sort of final negotiations to determine the exact location.
Okay.
It's in China, and we're currently in discussions to finalize that location.
Okay.
And this is going to be for final assembly. So it basically will integrate the components, the active valve, which we work with some contract manufacturers, and the damper body, and putting this together and sell to our customers.
So this is not a greenfield. Is that what you're saying?
This is probably going to be a brownfield operation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's supposed to come online 2024.
Yeah.
And so what kind of volumes are you looking at, and where do you see yourself, let's say, in 5 years?
Yeah.
Or end of the decade?
Yeah, so I'd say within 5 years, there's a huge market opportunity here, and we're really hoping that we're going to grow as fast as possible. We're also really looking at what does it take to actually build a auto tech business, and you need to launch nameplate by nameplate, and there's some growth curve to that.
Traditional automakers, they're used to being the 800-pound gorilla and can beat up suppliers left and right. And so your company that has IP that they desire puts you more of what I would consider more of a partnership.
Yeah.
But I think psychologically they still need to get over this, we're the 800-pound gorilla, you do as we say, right? And so how are you dealing with some of those growing pains, like understanding what the customer's needs are, even though they might be wrong at times?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little about how you're managing accounts and talking to your potential customers about stuff like that?
Maybe just quickly to get back to your last question, you were looking at like millions of vehicles basically is sort of the projection. It's sort of the like 6-year horizon.
That's huge. Okay.
And we've got sort of clear plan for what that takes, nameplate after nameplate. Oh, I'm talking about basically number of vehicles.
So just being more of a tech-focused engineer than a automotive-focused engineer, when you're dealing with these traditional automakers, can you tell us anecdotally some of the challenges, some of the funny stories or anything that you can say, well, I just, because I've been in meetings where I know the vice president doesn't even know what language is being coded, what systems are being used, but they're trying to dominate the meeting. And so I'm not trying to have you get anybody in trouble, but, could you just tell us some of these stories? Because I think they're worth kind of mentioning.
Be careful.
Yes.
It's okay,
Yeah, I mean, just kind of like crazy stories where you're like, I just got out of this meeting where this guy did this, right? Or this person did this, because there's always those meetings. Because as a startup, a lot of the traditional auto guys at a director or VP level, they're not dealing with startups, right? They're dealing with their underlings who are dealing with startups. And so if you're, as a startup, important enough to get in front of the VP of purchasing or whatever supplier quality, that's a big deal. But they sometimes are all thumbs because they think there's this established process that you probably have. And you're like, okay, well, we're still trying to figure that out. Our team is growing, blah, blah, blah. So maybe you can like at a 30,000 foot level, kind of being a startup that is trying to work with 120-year-old companies that are very set in their ways. Just a general.
So here's what I've learned. You need to play the game to make that work. So here's what I've learned. You need to sort of play the game, and that means walking through all the technical diligence, walking through person's process, and like an insider on it. And we've hired about half our team is sort of has automotive backgrounds. Other half is more technology and pure tech. But you also need to really inspire a couple. You don't need that many, but you need a couple like high-level leaders that really see the vision of where this is going and why it's really important. And this isn't a typical automotive product that goes through a chassis purchasing cycle. And you need those people driving this internal. And you get that vision, inspiration, one or two key decision makers, and then you play the typical process with people that understand how it's done. That's when you make progress.
I think, what some of the Chinese smart EVs, the type of experiences or features they're introducing, for example, the Unreal in Neo cars, they're putting up these screens for backseat passengers or rear seat passengers.
BMW.
That's a perfect opportunity because when you're having a conference on a AR, the ride is very important for you to not be sick. And I actually interviewed Ola Kalinius in the Paris Auto Show, and he was kind of skeptical about that Neo staying in the back. He said, "Oh, nauseous, what can you do?" That's the pain point.
And so this is, but this is coming from the CEO of Mercedes, who probably sells half of their S classes as L's, right?
Yeah.
A long wheelbase, right?
And the people sit in the back.
Yeah,
that's what they do, right?
Yeah.
And that's how do you further improve the experience?
And if you look at the latest commercials for Neo, for Li Auto, it's all about family. It's all about entertainment, watching videos in the back seat and stuff.
I think you're seeing this almost bridging the gap because so these S-Class, long version. This is a very niche market. Once you get to L3, and as you get to lower costs, more and more entertainment for the full family of the car, these use cases become much more manageable. So this is the time as we think about, one of the things you asked how long it took, and I said technology takes time, and we now we're there. But the other thing is the market today is really at the point where I think these immersive experiences, being able to work, not get motion sick, be entertained in the car. This is now. I think that's an exciting opportunity.
Because I talked about the last 5 years 5 years since I last met you, and Was there, because I felt like I didn't hear much about ClearMotion. Was
That was intense.
there, okay.
There's stealth, man. There's stealth.
It's like 3 inches.
Yeah, okay. All right.
It's like
So it wasn't,
coming off the runway, and then we turned on the stealth.
so it was more about, let's say, patience, perseverance,
That's right.
rather than, let's say, it was other difficulties, or the market is not ready and you kind of stuck to it. And,
It wasn't that. No, we've had like enormous market demand, let's say, like pretty consistently. Like there's been strong market demand. The tech wasn't ready early on. So when we first met, like technology wasn't there. We were able to create demonstrations, the system worked, but it didn't work every single use case very well. Because the level of refinement, just to give you an example, 1,000th of our force capability, if that's cycle, you'd hear it. There's noise in the car. 1,000th. So we had to eliminate down to such a precise level to make the system work. That took time. And what we realized was that we had more demand than we were ready to service, and the product wasn't ready. So we said, okay, we need to write it down, work on the tech, pick our first customer really strategically, get in the market, and then open the funnel. And now we're at the point where we're sort of ready to start opening that funnel.
go ahead.
I think you're making an example of what auto grade is, right? Because if you're a consumer's product, you would have been fine to launch the product. But auto grade is like bumps, like every single scenario is like, this thing is going to fall off because there's so many bumps in Michigan, right? And so I think it was pretty smart of you, because I think the startups that get that funding, they have pressure to launch products, and that's where they fail a lot of times, because they get a bad reputation because a couple of the early set of products is not great, and they're not able to update the software as quickly as possible. So I think with the IRA happening, and I'd mentioned this before we started recording, the United States is ready to move forward with a lot of new technology. One of the things that Lei and I believe is that the LiDAR that's already standard in most Chinese EVs at a certain price point, that's already bleeding over to American cars, right?
Yeah.
So,
And following on that point, was one of my questions is, so much has changed. The world has changed. The oil industry has changed. China has changed. All of that, the supply disruptions, COVID, geopolitical climate. Does that affect you in any way for what you're doing?
It's definitely had some effects. I mean, I think I would say that the global economy, especially in the non-mode space, is pretty intertwined and symbiotic and reliant on each other. And I think those symbiotic relationships will prevail, and they have to. But yeah, I mean, there have been some near-term sort of challenges.
Okay. Are you happy with your finances?
Yeah.
Are you looking for additional investment, or how is that?
Yeah, we're just kicking off a round.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, be talking to investors.
Okay. But it's looking toward 2024 production.
That's the getting to launch. Yeah,
Okay.
so basically the next round is get us to SOP, just started with
So you have the countdown, basically. You have the countdown, basically.
2024 until
Okay. Right.
how has the IRA benefited you, hurt you, or how do you look at that? Because, I mean, it's a game changer for the United States, at least. And so, can you comment on when it first came out? Did you think it was going to happen? Because me, living in Beijing, I was trying to be the cheerleader for Detroit in the United States. And, you know, unfortunately, there was only Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid that I could really kind of cheerlead for.
Yeah.
But I believe that there will be, in the next 5 years, some fledgling EV startups, because now you can Frankenstein together a vehicle pretty quickly. You still need that $1 billion to get it to production, but, you know, it's a little bit easier now. So can you comment on what you think, how you think the IRA may help you or create more challenges for you?
I'd say in the United States, I think you've got a lot of entrepreneurs that are pretty excited about the auto space, both at the OEM level, so fleeting new.
You're talking two nerds here, so
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two levels of innovation. One is like addressing market needs, and I think Rivian's really after stuff. Like they saw a market need in sort of the EV space that was totally untapped at the time. Now a lot of people are catching up, but it was untapped, and they said, this is a real opportunity. Let's do this. And I think they've been successful. I think the cost to start a car company it's still very expensive.
Yeah.
Difficult.
Yes.
But it has come down, and I think there's more availability of parts that are more standardized.
And I think another realization, I didn't mean to interrupt, is that investors now know the time horizon for return on investment is going to be much longer than 3 to 5 years, right?
That's important. And I would say that when we started the company, there weren't too many investors investing in auto tech. And really, we were finding investors that had been really successful going to a completely sort of new area that didn't have much venture capital, but like they were really successful, doing something different, doing something for tech. But now it's like, okay, you have a lot of investors that understand time horizons, understand the opportunity. I mean, you could build, like how many industries, could you really build like that? I've had really a large multi-billion-dollar, company, revenue company.
And there's so many branches that come off of that, like tier one, like the automotive companies and Tesla all talk about this services revenue that's supposed to pop up. I'm skeptical because the Apples and the Googles and the Amazons will you have to pry that from their dead hands. And so, but that's what makes it super exciting. By 2030, we're going to see in the top 10 mobility and transportation companies, probably some tech companies, probably some contract manufacturers like a Foxconn, maybe in the top 10, and then traditional legacies. So do you also see kind of this amalgamation of currently different players that become leaders in the space?
Definitely. I think as consumer kind of interests shift, it creates new opportunity. I'd say as consumer interest shift, regulation shifts. We just talked about some of the states that are starting to create EV mandates, such as California. That's driving. We have certain new market opportunities. And then technologies enable new market opportunities as well. So I think those three things between tech, consumer interest, and regulation, it's creating this environment that's really ripe for innovation, for new players entering the market, for existing players doing things differently. I think that there's a place for everybody to some degree. As long as
the passenger vehicle market is huge, 80, 90 million units a year. So
yeah, and I think you'll even see an expansion or sort of opportunity with that. About services, there's an expansion of sort of monetization opportunities because again, it's more than just selling a transportation tool. It's also about people's time. If you think about like Facebook or Meta, these companies, it's about capturing people's attention and monetizing that attention. If you think about people spending maybe an hour average per day in a car, that's a significant opportunity.
Are you looking to serve the robotaxi market or purely focus on retail?
No, are we focused, or was I just talking about?
No, are you looking to supply the robotaxi?
Yeah, right now we're very focused on the market opportunity today.
We talked for over 40 minutes, not one time about autonomous vehicles until now, right? So that's
all. Seeing some cruising around.
Well, we're going to definitely try to, hopefully to experience.
Constantly the Waymos.
Yeah, we saw one just on our way.
So I've gotten to ride in most of, or not most, but quite a few of the Chinese ones. Okay. And so I'm anxious to go drive.
Who are you most impressed by? Like which company do you think?
So I think Baidu has done a really good job, but you would expect them because they're the most well-capitalized and technology-forward company. Companies like WeRide, I think they're kind of chugging away. And, Lei had coined this term Chinafornia, and there's all these Chinese...
Pony AI, WeRide, a Deep Route.
Yeah, Deep Route really quickly. So there's this first wave, Baidu, WeRide, Momenta, and then you move into the second wave where it's Deep Route,
QCraft, yep.
Who don't need as much capital. And Deep Route, for instance, launched a L4 capable hardware software stack for $10,000 US. And Baidu, their Apollo, they haven't announced a manufacturer for it, but they announced a level 4 robo-taxi for $33,000 or $37,000. And so this is what I'm talking about before we start recording, where the Chinese innovation is pushing into the West, and the Western companies, instead of building technologies and R&D for two different platforms, ICE and EV, they're just switching
Yeah,
over.
I think the Chinese companies, they really made companies like NVIDIA, Qualcomm into what they are because they talk about the top-notch products, the 8155s, the Orange. That's their signature. That's their brand. If you don't have those, you're right.
And this is where it's going to get really interesting. And I think this is probably where you as a leader of this company also need to start paying, I'm sure you have, paying attention because, NVIDIA it's going to bifurcate, right? Because the server chips, they couldn't sell those, but now they have a China only server chip that can be sold. And so how that's going to work in the future, because if it's an ASIC, you can just turn on and turn off features pretty easily.
But on the flip side, these companies are also very, in the rear view mirror, there's Horizon Robotics. There's these type of Chinese companies that are going after NVIDIA's, the Qualcomms, and possibly you.
Well, not only that, because GM now has their own ASICs designing, NIO is designing their own ASICs. And so it goes back to the Amazons and the EVs and the ride hailing and mobility companies. And so we're going to see competitors that we wouldn't have even thought of 5 years ago. Right.
Yeah, that's what I was saying in terms of you guys want to, the branding needs to be carefully thought, whether it's ClearMotion or something that just like ClearMotion, something in Chinese that's very important.
You
need some social media ninjas too.
Yeah.
Like in China, I mean.
Yeah. There's a real opportunity in, say, for all of the brand around this because, we're ultimately selling an experience. If you think about high-end audio there,
you're probably going to be something of Unreal for a Neo.
Yeah.
Let's say, right, we have ClearMotion. That's our
it's like
selling point.
It's like Intel Inside back in the day for the x86, right?
Yep.
So if you could carve, because I can't think of any company right now, because everything is either back end or tier one.
Yeah.
But if you could brand it so it's like ClearMotion Inside or ClearMotion keeps you sane or whatever, I don't know. But
totally agree.
I think
that's 3D and branding. Yeah, I mean, I remember this story when my mother was buying a car in the 90s, and I remember the criteria she wanted is she wanted the Bose sound system in the car. That was like, okay, so what automakers offer the Bose sound system?
Right.
It's like, wow, like she bought a car based off this one technology that created this experience in the car, and then narrowed it down to 2 automakers at the time, and she chose one of its cars. I think that's an opportunity, and it creates value for the automakers,
right?
Too.
Right. So maybe probably at the end of it.
Yeah.
Speaking of Bose, you acquired the Bose's the comfort ride business, I believe, right? And then on the acquisition side, are you all set? Are you good with your technology in terms of who you're working with? That's done, right?
So we have all the pieces right now on the tech side.
Okay.
I'd say in the future, we always might be open to sort of the right opportunity on an acquisition side, but I think we're set for initial launch. Right now, we're pretty focused on really getting that launch out.
So is your product roadmap pretty robust over the next several years, or are you kind of, because quite frankly, I've spoken with a few of the Chinese EV startups that are either going to launch in this next year, and they've had to make certain adjustments due to market conditions between U.S. and China and things like that, right? And so do you feel that your product roadmap for the next 3, 5, 7 years is kind of geopolitics proof, or do you think there's some flexibility in that? Because when you talk software, there's data, right?
Yeah,
and and when you talk IP, then right?
I mean, IP, we've got global, like we're finally balanced all the major auto markets. So I think that's not an issue from a geopolitical perspective. Data is maybe the one area where needs,
definitely.
Yeah. So we've developed a platform, and this is sort of a second product in our pipeline. But it's basically a platform that we're developing to crowdsource road surface data, and you can actually stream into cars' road conditions to make better decisions.
Right.
So both for suspension, but even for driver assistance, like automatic emergency braking, we could tell it if there's ice in that lane.
Right,
And
right.
we
Okay.
also use the word surface itself to localize parts. So it's actually advanced edition technology. We're using that word fingerprint, which is very unique. And I've actually a few centimeters. But that's something that collects data, has a mapping component, and there are some regulatory sort of issues there. So our strategy for that is probably sort of local partners, data that resides in specific countries, to make sure we're following all laws as we look at that publishing.
Because it took XPeng almost 2 years to get Guangzhou HD maps approved.
Yeah.
And
Their city NGP.
It's difficult.
And I smirk because I went to the Robotics Institute at Carnegie Mellon before the COVID lockdown, and there was a company, a startup in the Robotics Institute that was using public buses to map the bumps in the road, and they said that none of the cities wanted it because it would basically the construction people, the transportation people would be out of work. That's kind of the irony of it. But
but I think my now that Xi and Biden they have met, I hope that's a starting point of a thawing of this kind of the tension. But on the flip side, I think for the foreseeable future, this protectionistic,
instinct
is going to be there for foreseeable future, because you want the best for your interest. But I think so that's going to be an issue of how they balance that out, and hopefully that won't affect what you're doing.
So Zach, thank you for joining us. Very illuminating. First of all, if you have any questions for us, we'll take the next few minutes. If not, let's keep in touch, because I would love to, first of all, being a nerd, love to actually try out your technology.
Come down to Boston.
Yeah.
Anytime.
If you're in Boston, no, seriously, if you're in Boston, we could set up a demo.
Okay. Thanks again.
From my side, thank you, Zach. I wish, ever since I met you guys, China has always been a factor, and now it's playing even more. So I wish nothing but the best for you guys, and hope everything works out as planned. And good luck. Thank you, and thank you for it's an awesome conversation.
Yeah, it was great chatting.
This is your co-host, Lei Xing. There's a Chinese saying that goes like this: it takes 10 years to forge a fine sword, which basically means persistence is the key to success. This applies perfectly to ClearMotion as they move on to the next chapter of their 10-plus year journey, which is manufacturing and actually putting their products onto vehicles that consumers can finally buy. Zach recently informed us that he was in China for a couple of weeks to iron out some of those details and meet with potential customers. And he was impressed with the growth of the EV market there. We wish Zach and his team the best of luck and are looking forward to seeing ClearMotion inside many of the upcoming new vehicles launches in China and the rest of the world.
Lei and I will be sharing more of our conversations with the men and women around the world, moving the EV, AV, and mobility sectors forward as part of this China EVs and More Max series. Some folks will be instantly recognizable, but some will just be people that are doing amazing things in the space that we think deserve to be highlighted. Don't worry though, Lei and I will continue to host our live weekly China EVs and More Twitter Spaces room that summarizes that week's most important news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility space. For those that can't catch the live show, you can find the China EVs and More pod on all major platforms or wherever you normally get your podcasts. As EV adoption reaches its global tipping point, it'll be even more important to stay updated on everything that's happening here. Lei and I are confident that China EVs and More is the best resource to do that. Until next time, as always, thanks for listening.